Good afternoon, Coolest Coast. It is time for Coffee on the Coast. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm your host today, Tina Prigge, welcoming guest Mark Moran. He's an antiques expert. He's got an extraordinary event planned for the Manitowoc Public Library. Mark, nice to see you. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Tina. It's great to be here.
So let's start off. Antique expert. What does that mean? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I've been doing this a long time. I've been involved with antiques forever, 1970s. Like many people, I was a collector. Uh, and the first time you walk into an antique shop, it's all sort of laid out there in front of you, and you really don't know what it is that you're looking at. And over time, you train your eye to spot the things that appeal to you, and that might be glassware, it might be ceramics, it might be furniture or fine art. And so like many people, I began as a collector in the 1970s. In the 1980s, I was a part-time antique dealer. My full-time job was I was a mild-mannered newspaper man. I was a reporter and editor at papers first up in Green Bay at the Press Gazette. But then for most of my career across the river, the Rochester Post Bulletin in Rochester, Minnesota, for about 30 years. But I was always involved with antiques on the side, working at auctions and antique shows. In the 1990s, I started writing antique reference books part-time, and I quit the newspaper business in 2002 to write books full-time, and I've written 25 books on various antique and collectible categories. All of my books are now out of print, so the books I wrote on antique and collectibles have themselves become collectibles, which is not anything I ever expected to have happen. But these appraisal events I started back in 2011 after I left Share. And over time, it has just grown and grown in popularity. It's been wildly popular almost from the beginning. And so before the pandemic in 2018, 2019, I was doing 140 antique appraisal events a year. But I tried to retire, but people kept calling me. So thankful that included those folks at the Manitowoc Public Library, where I will be coming up here very soon.
Yeah, let's tell
Yeah.
people the details. So, this event, Extraordinary Antique Appraisals by Mark Moran, is happening Saturday, February 22nd. It's from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., but registration is required so that you have a specific time slot, and that registration opens tomorrow. And just keep in mind, too, it's limit one item per person. So, Mark, talk a little bit about what can people expect. So, if they have to choose an item, what do you want them to be thinking about, and then what can they expect when they come to the appraisal?
Sure. It's the funny thing is that over the years I've discovered that people are just want to know the truth about what they have. They're not really concerned about the value. Although if they are pleasantly surprised that something is worth a lot of money, so much the better. But in most instances, it's that they just want to know the truth about Uncle Harry's rocking chair or Aunt Martha's vase, and sometimes as it goes from one generation to the next, these stories grow in the telling, and my job is to try and clear up those stories. So people should expect a lot of fun and anecdotes and tales from the road, and also sharing my experiences working with Antiques Roadshow, which I did for 9 seasons.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Tell us a little bit about what that was like. And, is there anything that sticks out in your mind as something that surprised you or that you were excited to see during that time?
Sure. I loved being on Antiques Roadshow. I started back in 2010, and uh, you know, through the years, I was able to travel all over the country with Antiques Roadshow. But as you may know, we don't get paid to be on the program, and we have to pay all of our own travel expenses. So what do we get? We get the visibility and credibility of being part of a wonderful program. Uh, we get to be part of a great event in having access to all those other wonderful experts we may not have the expertise that they do, so they can share that with us, and we get to be on TV, which is fun. But it was a wonderful experience. They invited me back in 2018. 2017 was my last year traveling with them. I was My last stop was actually Green Bay, the same night that Billy Joel was at Lambeau. So that, 5,000 teaks, nuts, and thousands of Billy Joel fans, all kind of gathering at the same corner around Lambeau Field there at the Resch Center. So it was a pretty wild night. They invited me back in 2018, all done, mainly because my own Manitowoc have been so popular. Already for this year, I've got almost 40 events booked just for Wisconsin, and that's where I stay now.
So, what is the definition of an antique? Is it just something that's a certain age? Like, is Billy Joel considered an antique? Or tell us a little bit about how we understand what an antique is.
Sure. I mean, the classic definition is that an antique is at least 100 years old. Things that are less than 100 years old, they've come to call them, collectible or vintage. Those are that people use in the antiques and collectibles trade. But we still fall back on antique being old. And it at one time every part of popular culture, and so it was new, and we're talking about it. But over time, collector groups grow up around glassware and pottery and fabrics and furniture, and so uh, that's just the way that collector fashions change over time.
And then, are you an expert in a certain type of antique? So, for example, when people are thinking of the one item that they bring to your event, is it books? Is it pottery? Is it household
There's a
items?
list. Sure, the library will have a list of all the categories that I can appraise, which are pretty broad, and of course the categories that are excluded. And it might be a good idea to share the excluded categories: weapons, no guns, swords, knives, things like that. If you have a pocket that has some advertising on it, it's okay. But no weapons, notes and currency, that's a really broad collecting category, that which is that I speak. I do not appraise leg hole traps, that many that were used to trap animals in the late 19th and early 20th century. I do not appraise fine jewelry. Costume jewelry is already precious gems. That is also not one of the areas of expert that I have. I don't appraise Nazi memorabilia or Beanie Babies. I hate to lump those two things together, but those are the two final categories that I do not appraise.
And then, what's behind you, Mark? Are those considered antiques? The
Well,
painting, for example?
over right here over my right shoulder, that's a painting by a Wisconsin artist. That's Anna Marie Ross. She was a wonderful painter in Wisconsin in the late 19th and early 20th century. Those are her children. There they are, that she painted. Over my left shoulder, that is a wonderful candle holder in the shape of an owl, bronze and tin, probably around 1890. But that's what you would expect to see in the house of someone who is interested in art and antiques. So that's pretty much my house, all over the place. Art and antiques everywhere.
So, here locally across the coolest coast, we've got a number of antique shops, curiosities,
Yep.
things like that. When somebody is out and about and looking at things, are there some rules of thumb that you would recommend they keep in mind as they're looking at items to judge whether it's an antique?
Sure. I mean, there are so many different categories. I think the best advice I can give anyone who is interested in buying antiques or in starting an antique collection is discover what it is that you love. Discover what your collector's eye tells you appeals to you. Find what you like, buy the best example that you can afford, and then over time upgrade your collection. A collection is not a static thing. It is something that changes with time. And as you learn more about a collecting category, as you learn about glassware, for instance, you might decide to focus on a interesting subcategory like glass or uh, bohemian clear to cut glass. There's just endless categories. But the find someone that you trust, either a dealer or another collector or an auctioneer or an appraiser like me, that will share their knowledge. The thing that I have always found unusual is that there were antique dealers over the years who did not want to share the information that they had accumulated, but but an informed point of knowledge, not a point of doubt or fear. So if you can enhance someone's knowledge and give them the courage to buy a good piece of whatever it is they collect, then they will be able to develop an excellent collection. I've seen many people over the years. I went on a house call once. The lady must have had 100 paintings, and she told me very proudly that she had never paid more than $25 for any painting. And I looked around the room, and she had 125 paintings. And I said, you know what? If you had bought one $2,500 painting, you would be much better off than you do with 125 paintings.
That is such excellent advice. Okay, so Mark, you're going to be doing an appraisal event, Extraordinary, on Saturday, February 22nd at Manitowoc Public Library. Registration is required, opens tomorrow, limit one item per person. What happens when somebody brings an item there? What is the meeting with you like?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's because it's appraisalist theater, there's usually an audience. There might be 20, 30, 40 people there. And, they bring their treasure up and set it on the table, and we look at it and talk about it. I share all the internet databases that I use to try and track down information. Sometimes we can just talk about the item, and I don't need to rely on the internet, but there are just a small handful of really important internet databases that can help people track down information about their treasures, and we talk about that. And I'm happy to share, the websites that I use.
Okay, fascinating. And then do you find with the work that you do in Wisconsin
Okay.
that there's a certain type of antique that's prolific, or is there something Wisconsin is known for that's a treasure?
It's mentioned just the other day. Someone brought in a piece of stamp art, which not wood, then pieced together images and picture frames and the different things. And Wisconsin has rich territory for this time, 19th century, is tramp art that is out there. That's something that I see in my state.
Okay, fantastic. Awesome. Well, I just want to remind viewers that you will be in Manitowoc for an event, Extraordinary, an antique appraisals event with Mark Moran, Saturday, February 22nd, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Manitowoc Public Library. Again, registration is required. Opens tomorrow, limit one item per person. Mark, is there anything else that you think people should know before they come to the event?
Uh, I just hope that folks come expecting to learn and about the truth that they have. I hope I can, but mainly it's just fun. Of all the things,
That is the best thing. And you know what? I've certainly had fun talking with you today, Mark.
well, thanks for having me. Hope to see everyone February 22nd, and it'll be a great time. My second event there. Have another great one.
Sounds wonderful. My guest today, Mark Moran, antiques expert. Hosting an event on February 22nd at the Manitowoc Public Library. I'm your host, Tina Prigge, signing off. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.